Director Walker, let's go ahead and are we ready to go?
I believe we are, Governor.
Okay, all right.
Okay, oops, I don't have my gavel. You have the gavel. I don't need the gavel. You have the gavel. We'll go ahead and have you call the meeting to order, and then I'll make some announcements.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It is February 8th, 2022. I am going to call the State Land Board meeting to order. My apologies for the participants. I had my eyes dilated this morning, so wearing sunglasses. So let's go ahead and get started. And I think we've got 2 consent items on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Governor. Members of the Land Board, I do want to make a little announcement. Our very brilliant IT staff here at the department have figured out how to provide closed captioning for the entire meeting today, and you'll see that across the screen. So we're very, very excited. All right, well, we'll move on. The first consent item is on page 3 of your screen. So I'll give you page numbers of your screens. So, Governor, you can't see your screen. But it is agenda item 1, and it is request for approval of the minutes of December 14, 2021.
Do I have a motion? Secretary Fagan.
So moved.
All right. Secretary Fagan moves approval of the minutes. Treasurer Reed provides a second. Hearing and seeing no objection, the minutes are approved.
All right, thank you, Governor. We will move on to agenda item 2, which is the proposed legislative concepts. That's plural, but we only have one. That's on page 5 on your screen. The issue is whether the State Land Board should authorize the Department of State Lands to proceed with drafting a 2023 legislative concept to submit to the Department of Administrative Services for review and drafting in preparation for a pre-session filing. And I realize 2023 is almost an entire year away, but we always have to start this process early. The Department of Administrative Services schedule for 2023 legislative concepts requires all agencies to submit their proposals for review by April 15th. We will maybe have another land board meeting prior to that time, but just to be safe, we thought we'd sneak in today on the agenda and get that approval. So let me talk about it a little bit. And once we submit it to DAS on the 15th of April, there's plenty of time for us to adjust it and revise it, or even at some point remove it if we find that we can't move forward. Engagement with agencies and stakeholders is going to be critical. And as you know, receiving that sort of feedback on our concept is going to be great. And I'm going to talk about that concept next. I see that we've already received a letter into the record from the League of Women Voters. I'm very happy for them to be on it like that. I can always count on Peggy Lynch to be right there thinking about the Common School Fund. So basically our concept is one, and you heard about it. We gave you a really detailed presentation last year, or it was the year of COVID. It was the year of COVID. And it was to make the Aquatic Resource Management Program have a sustainable fee structure. Because right now it does not, and it puts a significant financial burden on the Common School Fund. I don't believe Secretary Fagan was with us at that time, so I'm going to go into a little bit of detail so she's aware of what we talked about. Our Aquatic Resource Management Program, also known as ARM, protects Oregon waters and wetlands by administering the state's removal fill and wetlands conservation laws and ensuring that Oregon's public waterways are open to everyone. The fees charged for the program services absolutely do not cover the operating expenses. Without changing the removal fill and waterway use fee structures, the Common School Fund will continue to fund a portion of the operating costs. The unpredictable, and it is very unpredictable, and significant expensive waterway cleanups, as you know, we had a $12 million cleanup of Goble in 2018, is another factor why we should not be relying on the Common School Fund. The legislative concept will develop three things. One, we want to create the sustainable fee structure for removal fill permitting. And currently, what you will be shocked to hear is that the program only covers 20% of its operating expenses. 20%. And the reason for that is the current rate structure is based on volume of material being removed or filled, but it doesn't factor in costs of reviewing complex projects that take hundreds of thousands of hours of staff time, or in the case of the Jordan Cove natural gas pipeline, that was a 15-year drain on the department, and the maximum fee we could charge was $1,420. So since 1989, when the legislature gave the department the removal fill program, they have only allowed minimal fee increases for the removal fill rates. The second major area we want to address is the extreme impact of the waterway cleanup costs. As I mentioned, Goble was a significant drain on the school fund. And for example, we've done an analysis. The fees covered approximately 41% of operating costs in fiscal year 16 through 18, because while there was only one Goble at 12 million, there's a whole lot of abandoned and derelict vessels in the Portland Harbor and around the state that it takes significant funds to clean up. The third area is to capture costs for more services. Some services currently provided by the program, such as our general authorization removal fill permit, do not have associated fees due to statutory exemptions or having had no fees set. Roughly 40% of our services provided by the program currently have no associated fees. Now, I understand government needs to provide services to its citizenry, but government can't operate for free. So we'd like, the recommendation is that the department would recommend to the state land board that you authorize us to pursue and file a legislative concept regarding a sustainable fee structure for the aquatic resource management program. And we'll have plenty of time to work on that between now and the deadlines. Any questions?
Any questions or comments for Director Walker?
Madam Chair, Governor, I'm ready to enthusiastically move the recommendation, because I remember well you and I both expressing our concern about this 2+ years ago. So I'm excited that there's some momentum here.
Great. I will take that as a motion. Do we have a second from Secretary Fagan?
Second.
All right. Well, you have a seeing and hearing no objection to the motion. I think Director Walker, you have an enthusiastic support, unanimous support of the State Land Board to move forward on this legislation. I think we all think it's overdue, and hopefully it will be met with positive receptivity in the Oregon legislature next session. So.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Land Board and Governor. I know you won't be with us next session, but I appreciate that you have been involved in bringing this forward, and we will try to do our best and do a lot of stakeholder outreach. Okay, our next item is agenda item 3, the Common School Fund Audit Report. And on your screen, that'll be pages 7 through 45. It's a lengthy report. But it's a darn good report. And we will have some folks that will introduce that for you. But before we do, I wanted to make an announcement that what this great common school fund that we have here, that's currently worth about $2 billion, I believe. Anyway, we are going to announce that we have recently sent out a $64.2 million check to Oregon's K through 12 school districts for 2022. That's 4.1 million more than last year's distribution, and it's 9.2 million more than the 2020 distribution. The exceptional financial oversight of the fund by our Department of State Lands team and Treasury and the Oregon Investment Council doing a great job with our returns is sending more revenue to the fund and helping our Oregon students. And it helps all of the school districts across the state. So we will have now a presentation by our audit company, ID Bailey, and they will tell you all about how great we're doing. Leland Miller is partner at ID Bailey, and they are an audit firm that was hired by the Secretary of State's office, but it's independent of the Secretary of State's office. And Joseph Flager, our fiscal manager, is also on the screen and available to answer questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leland Miller, and we'll get started.
Well, thank you. Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed, Director Walker, appreciate this opportunity to be able to spend a few minutes with you today. Just really briefly, just to describe a little bit more about our firm. And I'm sorry to do this, Director Walker, but you're not the only one that has done this. It is pronounced ID Bailey. And then you're fine. We've had Edie, Eddie, where it's okay, but I thought at least I get that out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So anyway, we're a top 20 firm, mainly focused in the Midwest and the Western United States. I'm out of the Boise office. The firm does about 1,200 different government audits, a lot of state agencies, local and cities and counties and so forth. We also do some of the local governments in the state of Oregon, Deschutes County, Portland Community College, Rogue Community College, and then several government hospitals. So just to kind of give you an idea of at least our experience and understanding when it comes to governments. We also do several public pension plans and investment entities. So a lot of investment experience, which of course comes in real handy doing your audit with the amount of investments that you have. So that's just a brief introduction of our firm. We want to thank the staff, Jean, Joseph, Starr, and others. This year, one being a first year change in auditors, one, and second, that it was 100% remote. Just says a lot about the staff that we were able to come in, do the work, and also meet the deadline. You have a strict November 15th deadline. I think we issued a report a few days before that, and that would not have happened without their help, without them having all the information ready for us when we started the audit. So we want to thank them for their efforts and making this a first year successful audit. I'm just going to briefly touch upon a couple things within the financial statements. If you want to, you can join me on page 18 of the PDF is our audit report. We're happy to report that we had a clean, or also known as an unmodified report, that there were no issues or anything where we had to bring to the attention of management or to the board and modify our audit opinion. So the bottom line, it's a clean audit opinion. And again, that's a direct reflection on the quality of the organization and the accounting system and the people. So that's probably the most important thing to hear is, how well the audit went. The other thing I wanted to point out too, at least from a financial statement perspective, if you turn to page 22, page 22 is the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is just a snapshot of a point in time. So as of June 30th, 2021, these are the amounts of cash, investments. You've got some receivables and payables that are on there. And so as of that point in time, that's the dollar amounts associated with those line items. And those auditors, we go in and we don't take a look at every single solitary transaction. We'll go in and take a look at the one large items or items that are huge estimates, or maybe some audit perspective, they're a little bit more of a risk area. And probably the two biggest items on your balance sheet is one, of course, is your investment portfolio. You know, as Director Walker reported of how good of a year you had, you know, your returns was reflected upon a lot of the other investment funds that we've seen across our client base and everything. And so we take a look at those investments and do a pretty deep dive. The other area is within your, of course, is your deposit liabilities. You know, these are the amounts that you're estimating that you're going to be paying out potentially over time. You don't know, you don't necessarily know all the information, but you're making an estimate of what you think you're going to be paying out. And a lot of that's based on past history. And that's what management puts together. We evaluate that and we got comfortable. That seems like a pretty good estimate at this point in time. And then the last thing I want to at least point out on this page is the fact that your fund balance, basically your assets less your liabilities, is your fund balance. But if you'll notice, it's all restricted. There's no unrestricted amounts or anything like that. You know, between your constitution and your enabling legislation, it's all restricted for future uses and everything. So that's just kind of a brief summary on what the balance sheet is. You know, on the next page is your statement of income and expenses, and you'll see the biggest income, of course, is your investment income that came through this year. The rest of the report includes footnotes and additional information, just to let you know that there were no changes to those footnotes, no new standards that were implemented during the year where we had to do an additional footnote information. And those footnotes are there to just help the reader have a better understanding what's going on within the financial statements. So that's kind of a general, just important high things for from the financial statement perspective. Just in summary, you know, won't have you turn to, but on page 7 is a letter that we've given sent to the board, summarizes a lot of items. I'm just going to go ahead and just briefly read off a few of those things, but it's our communication to the board. So first of all, just want to let you know the audit was done on the generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. There wasn't any issues regarding when it came to our plan scope and timing of the audit. So basically, sitting down with Joseph and everyone, we came up with a plan. Everything went according to that plan, and we're able to do that. As a result, we were able to issue the report on time. We also need to disclose to you that our firm and the individuals that are on the audit are independent of the Common School Fund. And of course, without that independence, there would be no way we were able to give that opinion on the financial statement. So we're officially reporting to you as again, that we're independent to the Common School Fund. I've already mentioned that there were no new accounting standards for the 2021. For 2022, the big one is the lease standard. We are working with Joseph and trying to determine what the potential effect that could be on for the 2022 financial statements. So there will be some changes that you'll see in the financial statements for next year, but that's the only big one. There aren't any other ones that could significantly affect your financial statements. I mentioned about the significant estimates, you know, your deposit liability. Also within your investments, you have some alternative investments, or also we refer to hard to value investments. These are investments that don't have a readily available market. And so there's some additional procedures and steps that we have to do to get comfortable with those amounts. Plus also management's relying on your different investment fund managers and whoever's overseeing those investments for information regarding that. So we'll take a look at all those things. So those are kind of the two significant estimates to your financial statements. I've already mentioned there's no new financial disclosures in the footnotes. Now, some of your footnotes are what we refer to as sensitive. In other words, information or things that go on outside of the, you'll have to excuse me. As you can tell, I haven't been moving around enough. My lights just went off. There we go. So anyway, so within the disclosures, one of the sensitive disclosures, the fact with your investments, change in interest rate, any change in the market can affect those fair values. And so we're just pointing out to you, that's one of the sensitive areas when your financial statements. We didn't have any difficulties when it came to and during the audit. I've already reported how everybody was ready, it went smoothly, and we're able to meet your deadlines. Another good indicator of your process and your people is the fact of whether if there were any adjustments, accounting adjustments that were identified by us, either whether if they were corrected or not corrected. And we're happy to report that there were no differences that were identified. And again, that's a good indicator of your people and your system. No disagreements with management. And also that at the end of the process that we did receive written representation from management. The last couple items are that sometimes our clients will go to another accounting firm to maybe get a different opinion on an accounting issue. We're not aware of that happening during this past year. And then also, I think the last thing is, not only when do we look at the numbers, but we're also looking at your accounting system. And if there's any breakdown in that accounting system, we're required to report that to the board. And we're happy to report that there was nothing came to our attention where we believe there was a breakdown in the system, or if there's even some minor improvements or anything. So what we've seen and what we've looked at, you've got good systems, good people in place, and that it all leads to a good audit. So overall conclusion, for a first-time audit, totally remote, we believe it was very successful from our perspective. We really appreciated everyone's efforts and for the audit. So I open up, I guess, if there's any questions or anything.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Really appreciate your presentation and appreciate your comments. Any questions from Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed? All right, looks like you're off the hook. Really
All right.
appreciate your time and energy. I'm grateful for the level of detail that you went in this report. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Governor. We'll move on to agenda item 4. I think it was really important for Bailey and Mr. Miller to go through in detail so that Oregonians can feel confident that we are handling money well and it is being invested well. We'll move on to the next agenda item 4 on page 46 on your screen, and it's the Oregon Department of Forestry's annual report. And joining us today is the new state forester, Cal Mukamoto. And I don't know, Cal, if you're accompanied by Kate Skinner or not today.
Yes, I am.
You are? Okay, great. So there you are, Kate. So I'm going to turn it over for you all to go over your wonderful report. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Director Walker. Good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, and Secretary Fagan. As was mentioned, I'm Cal Mukamoto, Oregon State Forester and Director of the Department of Forestry. And for clarification, Kate Skinner is with me, and she is the interim chief of our State Forest Division. Our State Forest Division is responsible for the management of more than 700,000 acres of public lands in Oregon, including the 33,000 acres of common school forest lands. We appreciate the opportunity to brief you today on common school forest lands management activities and financial outcomes for fiscal year 2021. As you know, under our agreement, your common school forest lands are managed using the same approach we use for Board of Forestry lands. The management plan strives to balance environmental, economic, and social factors to achieve the greatest permanent value for all Oregonians. Incorporating all of these areas into our management helps ensure that these public lands continue to be healthy, productive forests that provide a variety of benefits to people and their communities. Timber harvest revenues and income from jobs associated with those harvests are a core part of the economies of rural communities throughout Western Oregon. These revenues also go to fund critical public services at the county level, and as you all know, to the state's Common School Fund for educational services statewide. Forests are also an essential tool to addressing the escalating climate crisis. Conservation efforts also provide essential habitat for wildlife and contribute to clean soil, water, and air. And last but not least, many Oregonians have a close personal relationship with forests and the myriad of outdoor activities that take place in and around forests are a core part of our lives. And I'll now turn this over to Kate to provide more detail on our management of the common school forest lands in fiscal year 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, Secretary Fagan, and Director Walker. For the record, again, my name is Kate Skinner, and I'm serving as the Interim State Forest Division Chief for Department of Forestry. So as the State Forester shared, the department manages 33,000 acres of common school forest land throughout the state, covering geographies from the Coast Range to Willamette Valley, Southwest Oregon, and Eastern Oregon. So these are working forests and benefit the fish and wildlife and the benefit of timber revenue. When we talk about that these are actively managed lands, our activities are through sale layout, timber sale administration, reforestation, and young stand management, including road construction, road maintenance, fish passage projects, as well as managing the access easements and property line surveys, and a large effort on threatened and endangered species surveys. We also have incorporated a very robust public engagement and outreach process through our management of the lands. So today I'm going to highlight some of the financial outcomes that are captured in the report that's been provided to you. And also Director Walker shared some questions ahead of time that I want to make sure that I cover today to provide some clarity for everybody and a little bit of a historic perspective of the lands that we manage. The financial outcomes from fiscal year 21 was a production of 4.2 million board feet, and the harvest of that resulted in $2.57 million of revenue. These financial outcomes are intrinsically linked to the timber economy, and they fluctuate over time. Our timber sales are usually a 3-year contract, and it's up to the purchasers to decide when they're going to harvest that timber. And it's often due to the availability of operators as well as the timber market driving their decisions. We've seen a slowdown this last year of timber harvest, but the log market and log prices have remained strong throughout the year. So in fiscal year 21, the cost for our management was $1.45 million and provided a net operating income of $1.12 million. In the report that we provided in table 2, you see that the cost has fluctuated over time for the cost to manage the lands. This is due to T&E surveys or district by district expenses related to managing those lands. So when you look from fiscal year 20 to 21, the cost for managing the lands was decreased by $45,000 across all of our districts. So if there's no questions on that highlight of fiscal year 21, I wanted to take some time to talk about Director Walker's questions she provided.
Kate, let me just see if there's any questions from the board. Nope, you're safe. Keep going.
All right, thanks. So in the report, we provide the past year numbers as well as a 5- and 10-year average. So in table 1 has the net operating income, and the 2017 net operating income was the lowest over the last 5 years due to changes in the management of the Elliott. So in 2017 was the last year the Department of Forestry managed those lands on your behalf. And the staffing in the Coos Bay district was still in place, and our commitments for T&E surveys and road maintenance and fire protection costs were all covered in there. So as you can see, the costs were a little over $2 million and the income was a little over $2 million. So that's been a question in the past around why that number has shown up in the report as the lowest operating income year. In addition, you can see in 2019, there was an average stumpage price that fell all the way to $170 per thousand. And that was a result of over 90% of our sales in that particular year were pine sales, which are usually a lower value, as well as pulp sales for small diameter thinnings. And so those all, the amount of volume there averaged, brought our average down on our timber prices for that particular year. So as I said before, the fluctuation in the timber market and the product that we're providing for sales each year can fluctuate the prices and the incomes. So are there any questions about those pieces? Okay, thank you. So I wanted to look to the future a little bit here. So I reported on what was harvested in fiscal year 21. I wanted to share what was sold. So during that time period, we sold over 4 million board feet, and we're valuing that at $1.7 million. And the sale prices that we've received this last year, as I said earlier, the price for logs has stayed strong. So we're averaging at $404 per 1,000 board feet. And so that revenue will come in over the next 2 to 3 years. For our planned timber harvest or planned timber sales in fiscal year 22, they're totaling 7.2 million board feet and an estimated net value of $3.2 million before the ODF managing costs are factored in. So we're feeling that the fiscal year 22 and 23 should see an increase in the revenue back to Department of State Lands and the Common School Fund. So if there's any other questions for me or the report, that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Kate. Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed, any questions? All right. Thank you very much, Kate. Really appreciate that report.
Thank you. And thank you in advance for questions that came my way that I could give to the department so they could provide that information in the report. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is another fabulous report. That's on page 60 on your screen. It's the Common School Fund Real Property Annual Report, and Deputy Bill Ryan will deliver that report. And I believe that Leanne from our comms shop will be sharing her screen. So take it away, Bill.
All right, thank you very much. Let me get my screen set up here. Leanne's screen sharing just took over my screen here, and I got to figure out how to move it. There we go. 2 years in, and still sometimes challenged with the telecommunications equipment. Good morning, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed. For the record, my name is Bill Ryan. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Deputy Director of Operations for the Department of State Lands. I am pleased to be presenting key findings from the Real Property Program's annual report for fiscal year 2021. The full report is in your meeting packet. As you know, upon statehood in 1859, the U.S. Congress granted Oregon nearly 3.4 million acres of land to help finance K-12 education throughout the state. Next slide, please. Approximately 775,000 acres of school lands remain in state ownership today. These include rangelands leased for grazing by ranchers in Eastern Oregon, agricultural lands that produce alfalfa, corn, and other crops, forest lands that generate revenue from sustainable timber harvest, grazing, and other uses. Our forests also include the Elliott State Forest, which is not harvested currently, and that's a topic I'll elaborate on a bit later. We also have parcels slated for industrial, commercial, or residential development. These lands may one day support local economies and housing needs, as well as other crucial community services. That image there is of the Stevens Road parcel at the southeast corner of Bend, which I'll touch on a little bit later as well. Next slide, please. There are also lands for solar and geothermal renewable energy. That's a geothermal lease in Lake County. And we also have special stewardship lands that are managed to protect scenic, natural resource, cultural, educational, or recreational values. The Department's Real Property Program manages these school lands, as well as an additional 768,000 acres of subsurface mineral resources on behalf of the State Land Board. We act as stewards of those resources. Through land sales, leases, and other use authorizations, we maximize revenues sent to the Common School Fund for public education. For fiscal year 2021, $22.8 million in operating income was added to the fund. I do need to note that this is a correction to the figure that's actually in the printed report, which we'll need to correct. And I'm sorry about that, but I caught that numerical error when I was preparing this presentation. We'll be posting a corrected report for the State Land Board webpage following this meeting. We follow best management practices to protect lands and resources for the benefit of future generations. So now I'm going to provide a brief review of some of the most notable management activities in fiscal year 2021, starting with land use authorizations, which brought in about $1.3 million in revenue last year. So last year, we had 151 grazing leases on rangelands and on some forest lands as well, and those continued to bring in substantial revenues, approximately half of all income from authorizations, as you can see from that pie chart. In fiscal year 21, we had 12 agricultural leases, which also comprised about a quarter of authorization revenues. Additionally, we oversaw 24 communication site leases. And these types of authorizations allow utilities to place facilities for cell phone and internet service or emergency communications or cable or radio broadcasts on state lands. And the communication site leases generate significant revenue for the Common School Fund, particularly on a per acre basis. However, they also cause a high workload for staff to manage those agreements. For this reason, DSL is in the midst of rulemaking that will create a new rule division just for communication site leases, making management more efficient and increasing revenue. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have three categories of forest lands that are under the department's oversight. The first two contribute significantly to our operating income. The first is certified forest lands, which make up about 33,000 acres of DSL's forest lands, and they're managed and harvested by the Oregon Department of Forestry on behalf of the department, as you saw from the report that was presented just before me by our partners at ODF. As was discussed in ODF's annual report on forest lands, in fiscal 21, timber sales generated about $1 million in net revenue for the Common School Fund. The department also manages 8,500 acres of non-certified forest lands, and these are lands that are not managed for the department by ODF, and that's because they tend to be slow-growing forests that produce minimal income from timber sales. These lands generate some revenue from grazing, easements, and other land use authorizations. In fiscal year 21, the non-certified forest lands actually had a net loss of about $39,500 because management costs and fire protection costs in particular were greater than revenues for that year. Finally, there is the 82,500 acre Elliott State Forest located in the Coast Range northeast of Coos Bay. And while the Elliott historically sent revenue to the Common School Fund, timber harvest declined precipitously in 2013 and halted altogether in 2017 following a lawsuit regarding compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act. The forest requires ongoing expenses for road maintenance, reforestation, fire protection, and efforts to create the Elliott State Research Forest. In fiscal year 2021, the Elliott cost the Common School Fund roughly $1.4 million, which reduced the overall performance of our forest lands and of the real property portfolio as a whole. We are continuing to work with the Oregon State University, the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee, stakeholders, and the public toward creating a publicly owned research forest that is decoupled from the Common School Fund. And with the Oregon legislature currently considering Senate Bill 1546 to establish an independent public agency to oversee the research forest, and also considering providing the $121 million needed for full decoupling from the Common School Fund, we are well on our way to making your land board vision a reality.
Bill? I'm
Yes.
just going to let you breathe for a moment and just want to say thank you. Obviously, this bill is not done yet. I am cautiously optimistic that it will make its way through the legislature, but I know Director Walker, you and your team, people have spent an extraordinary amount of time and energy on this. We are very excited and just want to say thank you for your effort, your dedication and determination to make this vision become a reality. So thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Yes.
I'll second that.
Yes.
All right.
It's been quite a ride, and really will be just an amazing accomplishment, a true legacy effort. So thank you to the board for all your support in addressing this as well. Okay, well, I will continue on to land transactions. We had two high-profile sales of lands classified as industrial, commercial, or residential use, and those helped add housing and economic opportunities to Central Oregon in fiscal year 2021. The biggest was a 382 acre portion of the Stevens Road tract at the southeast corner of the city of Bend, which sold in November of 2020 for $22 million. The sale of the parcel will allow for the development of a mix of housing, businesses, and other uses. And there still remains about 261 acres of that tract in state ownership, with the potential to be added into Bend's urban growth boundary and developed in the future. We also, in April of 21, sold a 20-acre parcel that was part of our South Redmond tract to the Oregon Military Department for $1.6 million for the development of a regional readiness center. The Readiness Center will serve as a training facility for the National Guard and an emergency center for national disaster events such as a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. The parcel was sold the parcel that was sold is part of a 945-acre tract that the department has been preparing for development. We are currently focused on selling a parcel that's 200 acres or larger in size to satisfy the city of Redmond's requirements for a large lot industrial zoning. Overall, the project is expected to attract technology businesses and bring more family wage jobs to Central Oregon. It should be noted that these land sales were unusually high for this year and were the result of years of strategic planning by real property staff. Finally, there were also 4 smaller property sales in 21, including mineral rights sales that helped conserve habitat for salmon and the endangered Fender's blue butterfly. So we evaluate the performance of our properties based on 4 financial performance measures that are identified in the department's real estate asset management plan. I do want to note that the $23.8 million in income that the department received from land sales in 21 is not factored into these measurements. Those land sale earnings are tracked separately in the land sale revolving fund where they are available for use for future lands investments. But as a result of this, land sale profits are not acknowledged in the operating income and other metrics. In fiscal year 21, the total annual revenue from the real property program management activities was $4.85 million, which was about $327,000 less than was reported in 2020. Factors that contributed to this decline include a reduction in grazing fees, which are calculated using a formula based on calf prices, and calf prices had gone down. Delayed payments from 2 mineral and energy resource authorizations that actually got paid in fiscal year 22. There are also just the year-to-year fluctuations in timber harvest, as well as the sale of our ICR, industrial commercial property in Hillsborough, the Helvetia property, a couple of years ago, which used to generate significant lease revenue. But of course, we sold it and it's no longer generating lease revenue. Return on asset value measured net revenue compared to market value of lands. In 21, the return on asset value across all land classifications averaged a negative 0.08%. So taking it out 3 percentage points, but basically was pretty much flat. And that of course does not include land transactions. That number would be positive if we didn't include the cost for the Elliott State Forest. So once the Elliott transfer occurs, our return on asset value should increase significantly. Net operating income increased by about $150,000 compared to the previous year, but was overall still in the negative, once again, due to the drain on revenues from the Elliott, as well as an additional $160,000 bill for fire management that came in from BLM a little late and was paid for the 2019 fire season. And then finally, land values do continue to appreciate. As I was putting together this presentation, I did catch a slight error in our calculation, which are now accurately reflected, but I'll need to update in the posted land annual report. Land value appreciated by 1.8%, not 1.9%. And additionally, rangelands were estimated to increase in value by about 7% as opposed to the 21% shown in the report. And that was just a transcription error, unfortunately. So my apologies for having to update the report after the fact. Next slide, please. So looking forward, the department's real property program will continue to manage Oregon school lands with a commitment to growing long-term revenue directed to Oregon schools. Now, I'll talk a little bit about some of our forthcoming projects. A big one is updating the real estate asset management plan. This is a 10-year plan which provides policy guidance for day-to-day management of the real property portfolio, and it will expire this year. And so we'll be spending the next several months basically updating that plan and doing so with a stakeholder outreach. We anticipate presenting a performance report on the previous plan and an overview of our proposed approach to developing the new plan to the land board at your meeting in June. The real property team will also continue to work to improve and sell the remaining acres of the South Redmond and Stevens Road tracts. We're also seeking a buyer for our 159-acre Milliken Road property located on the western edge of the city of Prineville. So we're actively marketing those large parcels. We'll be pursuing rulemaking to update our special use lease fees and rule structures, including creating a new set of rules specific to renewable energy leasing. And as I mentioned previously, we're working to create a new rule division for communication leases as well. So basically, bringing up the fees that we do charge to better match the market of adjacent states, as well as looking at a marketing strategy for doing more renewable energy leasing on state lands. And then table 2 in the report shows land classifications based upon the department's estimate of potential revenue generation. And we still have about 1.25% of the total school lands that are not currently generating revenue, but which have been identified as having potential for short or long range revenue generation. And so we will be focusing on looking at those parcels and figure out how to generate more revenue, in particular, looking at the potential for renewable energy, solar in particular, but also there's some good opportunity for wind energy as well as potential for additional communication sites, which will have higher value leases. We'll also be assessing the mineral value of state lands, working with the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. We do have one large lucrative diatomaceous earth mine in the southeastern part of the state out near Druzy, which has been under lease with the department since 1982. And this was the mineral lease that was a delayed payment that I mentioned earlier. And also we'll continue to assess the potential for new agricultural conversions of school lands. And these conversions involve working with lessees to convert unirrigated rangeland to irrigated crop production, which increases the per acre revenue to the department. We'll also continue to work with the Bureau of Land Management to receive about 1,400 acres of federal in lieu land still owed to the state upon admission into the union. We are working with BLM to identify the value of base lands still owned to the department, and we've submitted applications for multiple suitable parcels. Actually, roughly 24 different parcels that were on their list of potential parcels to exchange.
Bill, any possibility of this getting wrapped up by the end of the year? It'd be nice to close this chapter.
Governor Brown, that would be wonderful. Unfortunately, the roadblock has actually been at BLM. They've had multiple retirements and challenges with staffing. We've actually had some good productive work out of the Prineville district, and we will certainly try to get that done by the end of the year, but I can't guarantee that because it really is dependent upon BLM's responsiveness.
I think Director Walker would concur in my request. If we can get this done through the end of the year, that would be great. And I understand if BLM can't make it happen, but it would be really fabulous to put a bow on that package as well.
Yes, thank you, Governor. And we do have a regular meeting with the BLM district manager out of Prineville to work on that. That's where most of those parcels are. The ball is in BLM's court at this point. So we will continue to probe them and encourage them to respond. In addition to continuing work toward the creation of the Elliott State Forest, we'll also evaluate opportunities to improve the financial performance of our certified forest lands. DSL's forester Ryan Singleton has already begun the process of assessing management costs of high priority forest lands. The Board of Forestry and ODF are working on developing a habitat conservation plan that will cover roughly 26,000 acres of DSL's forest west of the Cascades. This will increase the certainty and predictability of harvest volumes and reduce the risk of litigation liability. And the timeframe for that HCP and forest management plan is roughly on the same time frame as that for the Elliott State Forest. So significant changes for and predictability regarding our forest lands coming in the next year or so. And then finally, as drought conditions are expected to continue throughout central and eastern Oregon in 22, we'll be working with our leaseholders to reduce the impacts of grazing during the growing season. We do this to maintain land value in the long term and ensure unusual circumstances do not impact revenue generation down the road. But unfortunately, that does result in reductions in the amount that we charge for those leases because the amount of forage or the number of cattle or cow-calf pairs allowed on those lands is reduced in order to protect the land during a drought. Last slide, please. This concludes my presentation of the Real Property Annual Report. I would like to add that this work is made possible by the dedication of our real property team, most of whom are operating out of our Bend field office. It's a talented group and it's led by our new interim real property manager, Amber McKernan. So congratulations to Amber for stepping up and managing that crew for us. They use their knowledge and skill sets to further the missions of the State Land Board and the department every day. And along the way, they build and strengthen our connections with the communities we serve and help to keep our school lands healthy and prosperous for years to come. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Bill. Any questions, Secretary Fagan? Treasurer Reed?
Madam Chair, thank you. Just a couple. And Bill, thanks to you and to Amber and the rest of the team. Two questions or two sort of subjects that came up, and I was always kind of struggling about where to break in. One, when you talked about the real estate sales, I heard you, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but I think I heard you say something about the proceeds being available for future land investments. And I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. You know, it's my continued contention that we are best when we are not engaging in specific property sort of speculation and a longer term strategy. So I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed. Yes, you did, Treasurer Reed. There's actually a separate revolving fund that the proceeds from land sales go into. Now, the department has not for several years now made any purchases using those funds. Basically, it's the land board that makes determinations as to whether additional purchases and sales occur. And actually looking at that strategy and what to do with these lands moving forward is what we're going to be looking at as we review and update the real estate asset management plan.
Thank you. I continue to think highly of the real estate team at Treasury and their ability to put us in a really well diversified posture with respect to those opportunities. The second question, I guess there's an advantage to me having waited because you covered a lot of it in that last slide about future opportunities. I was particularly interested in your comments around the additional opportunities that may exist around solar and wind. And I wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's any more detail you were leaving out in the interest of time, I'd sure like to hear more of it.
And Bill, before you respond, can I do a little addendum to Treasurer Reed's question, and that is specifically regarding geothermal?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed. So for renewable energies, the real challenge or the major challenge that we have is transmission. And so, in fact, the Milliken Road property near Prineville, actually, we had under an option for purchase by a tech company, one of the big black data center type companies, and they ended up not purchasing that because of a lack of energy transmission capacity. So that's something that we are looking at. Actually, the Department of Energy is working with the grant from the Federal Department of Defense to look at renewable energy prospects statewide, and the connection with Department of Defense is because Air Force training grounds that you can have a conflict between renewable energy, think windmills and that sort of thing. And so they're basically looking at where is the best potential for renewable energy and where it will not interfere with military training, et cetera. And so that report actually will be coming out shortly, and it will basically serve as a bit of a roadmap for identifying where the best potential areas are for us. Director Walker, when she's in the legislature, actually pushed forward some legislation that allows the state to actually invest in transmission and transmission corridors. And so that's something we'll be looking at as well. The department has, up to now not been very proactive in terms of trying to market for renewable energy. It's been more as companies come in and look, but I think there's some opportunities and some organizations or companies that can help us with that marketing, because there really is a lot of potential. And a lot of our lands that have that renewable energy potential are rangelands where the uses are pretty compatible. Basically, you can do solar, you can do wind, and not disrupt those range uses as well. And we have some very large blocks of land in the eastern part of the state to do that. Regarding geothermal, sorry, Governor, I actually am not very up to speed on that. I know that there are some resources. We actually have an entity that is looking at a new geothermal lease with us. And so there's, of course, a lot of research and they drill wells and, just to see what the ability is for producing energy and then, working that out. So that is something that we're looking at as well.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate that. The idea of being proactive on those fronts. I remember then Senator Walker's legislation, and I also appreciated your mention of the Druzy. Then Representative Bentz took us on a pretty bumpy ride on that road one time. So I remember that as well.
Yeah, and that's a nice leasehold. Unfortunately, Oregon actually does not have a lot of super valuable minerals, and so it's nice where we can actually generate some revenue from those. And also another thing that we're doing to increase revenues is looking at our forest lands. We have the certified forest lands, but we do have 8,500 acres of non-certified forest lands. And those tend to be scattered parcels or not as productive. But now that we've had a forester on staff for the last couple of years, that's Ryan Singleton. He's been really focused on the Elliott and the Board of Forestry HCP work, but also looking at managing our other forest lands. And he's identified some parcels up in Hood River County, actually, where we actually have some significant harvest potential on, I forget what it is. It's roughly 700 acres of property, something like that, up in that area. So that's something we're going to be looking at also, and maybe actually doing a partnership with the county for them to actually do the harvest sales for us, kind of like ODF does for us, since we only have the one forester on staff. So definitely looking at different things, but having that forestry expertise on hand has been really, really helpful these last couple of years, and with the Elliott effort as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Governor, I wanted to follow up on the bill that Bill Ryan mentioned when I was in the Senate. I can't remember the year, excuse me, or the bill number, but it had to do with Article 11D of the Oregon Constitution that allows us to generate electricity. When that article was passed in the Constitution, Oregonians envisioned they would own dams and build dams and generate electricity that way. But we're not doing that anymore. And when I passed the bill, it actually was a 2-session or 3-session bill, I can't remember. But we got an opinion from the Department of Justice that we could use it for transmission lines. And so, as Deputy Bill Ryan mentioned, that is the weakest point all across the country, is a lack of transmission lines. And I think, Governor, you discussed it when you were chair of the Western Governors Association. So it is definitely something that would help us in our renewable energy efforts. And the bill that I passed allows us to bond for that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Bill, for this excellent presentation. Really appreciate your time and energy. Any other questions or comments from the land board? All right, Director Walker, back to you to wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, members of the board, for your patience and listening to our great reports today. I just have one item for you under other, and it's a great segue to what Bill was talking about with the Elliott. I just want to express my support for all of the efforts that have gone into Senate Bill 1546, which is our Elliott State Research Forest bill. Has truly been exceptional. As You all know this started out as a one-year commitment with the advisory committee, and 3 years later, they are still in, they are all in, and they are really enjoying the fruits of their labor. Significant work has been done, and I just want to let you know how involved we have been in involving the public. So throughout the fall, we had 3 advisory committee meetings. We had 8 advisory committee work group meetings. We had 4 public information sessions and weekly public drop-in sessions from September to December. Now, these are all being held virtually because of the pandemic, but there has been every opportunity for interested parties to participate in these conversations. These conversations have helped us shape the legislation. And I want to tell you how much I truly appreciate the tribal support. Our tribal governments have been at the table the entire 3 years. We have collaborated with them. We have shaped the legislation that included their comments. And this department highly values consultation, government to government consultation, and regularly engages in that practice, particularly with regard to the Elliott. Even when this bill passes, and Governor, I understand we're all cautiously optimistic. Every one of us have served in the legislature, so we know what happens, what can happen. But I am incredibly optimistic. I fully expect the bill to move out of the Senate Policy Committee today to Ways and Means, and that should happen this afternoon in just a couple of hours. Let's hope that all works out. But I do want to let you know that we're continuing to work to quantify the potential revenue for carbon, and we're taking steps for the Elliott State Research Forest Authority to be able to sell carbon credits should the authority become a functioning entity. We also are continuing our discussions with the General Services Administration, known as GSA, with the Department of Corrections and your office, Governor, around whether there is a pathway for the Shutter Creek Correctional Facility down in Coos County to become the headquarters for the Elliott State Research Forest Authority. We took a tour, as I mentioned before, and I think those conversations are not off the table yet. We are continuing in those discussions. I will have a full extensive briefing for you at our last meeting in December of this year, Governor. I hope to bring you a lot of good news with regard to the work that we've engaged in, and know that we have taken this all very seriously. And I know that you all appreciate it. We got a directive from the land board, and we did not sleep a wink until we went forward. And I think we've collectively, the advisory committee, the public, and our staff here have done a tremendous job. And the land board has been a great asset and assistant for us as well. So that's my topic for the other conversation today. Our next meeting will be in April, and I'm trying to arrange a trip to the East Coast to see my grandchildren, and trying to get back in time for our land board meeting. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussions today, Governor, unless any of you have any questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate that update. As I said, we're all watching this process very optimistically and cautiously. And I know that a number of folks are having conversations with individual members of the legislature on the Elliott bill, and really appreciate your work on that. I am not seeing any questions or comments from my colleagues on the land board. I want to say thank you again to you and the department for the presentations today. Thanks to the Department of Forestry, new Director Cal Makamoto, for presenting. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.